encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Kyungju come together. APEC meets Kyungju.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong, in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
As of just after 2 p.m. on Monday, Korea Standard Time, and the U.S. and China are taking a break from their trade war following last month's summit between their two leaders in South Korea's port city of Busan. And over in the States, the U.S. Senate has passed a deal designed to end the country's longest shutdown on record, which now leaves the amended package in front of the House before President Donald Trump can add his signature. Meanwhile, back here, South Korea is gearing up to host over 550,000 students this Thursday, who will be taking the college entrance exam known as the Suneung. And test papers have now been delivered to test centers under heavy security until the day of the exam. The long-awaited truce in the prolonged trade war between the U.S. and China took effect today. And the move follows the summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held in South Korea's Busan city 2 weeks ago. Our Song Yu-jin starts us off.
The heated trade tensions between the world's two largest economies appear to be entering a temporary cooling phase. Starting Monday, the United States has halved its fentanyl-related tariffs on Chinese imports from 20% to 10%. President Donald Trump made the announcement aboard Air Force One following his October summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Busan. The agreement finalized the framework set by negotiators in Kuala Lumpur just days before that high-stakes meeting.
I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is it's a big tariff. And based on his statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 20% effective immediately. I believe he's going to work very hard to stop the death that's coming in.
With this, the overall U.S. tariff rate on Chinese goods will fall to roughly 47% from 57%. In return, Beijing has suspended its new export controls on rare earths for 1 year, critical materials used in electric vehicles, smartphones, and military hardware. It has also suspended retaliatory tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, including soybeans and pork, in response to Washington's fentanyl-related measures. In addition, the two sides have extended their mutual reciprocal tariff suspension for another year, which was due to expire this month.
The main consensus reached during the economic and trade consultations in Kuala Lumpur between China and the United States pertains to the U.S. Section 301 probe measures against China's maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding industries, as well as the extension of the suspension period for reciprocal tariffs.
This has brought good news for South Korea as well. On Monday, China's Commerce Ministry announced a one-year suspension of sanctions on 5 U.S.-based subsidiaries of Hanwha Ocean. Last month, the ministry had barred Chinese organizations and individuals from doing business with these companies, accusing them of supporting the U.S. government's Section 301 probe into China. 송유진, Arirang News.
In Washington, D.C., the Senate took a first step to end the prolonged government shutdown as a group of moderate Democrats on Sunday crossed party lines to push forward a plan to restore federal services. But conversation around healthcare subsidies are expected to continue. Our Suneung has the latest.
The United States is moving closer to ending its longest ever government shutdown as lawmakers backed a compromise plan to restore federal services. On Sunday, the U.S. Senate advanced a short-term funding bill to reopen most federal operations through the end of January in a vote of 60 to 40, with 8 Democrats joining Republicans.
On this vote, the yeas are 60 and the nays are 40. 3/5 of the Senate duly chosen and sworn, having voted in the affirmative. The motion upon reconsideration is agreed to.
The bill would restore standard operations across a wide range of federal agencies. This includes the processing of passports, federal court schedules, national parks and museums, small business administration loans, and regulatory inspections. Civilian staff at the Department of War and the Transportation Security Administration would return to regular pay status. Back pay for all furloughed federal workers would resume once the measure is enacted. However, the plan does not include an extension of Affordable Care Act premium subsidies, which Democrats have been fighting for. They argue that ending the subsidies would raise insurance costs for millions of Americans. A separate vote on the healthcare issue is expected in December. The federal shutdown is now in its 40th day, following the lapse in funding at the start of the fiscal year on October 1st. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned that the economic impact is worsening as federal procurement and contracting remain suspended. The short-term government funding bill now requires debate and passage in Congress before it can be sent to President Trump for signature. If enacted, the government would reopen temporarily with the next funding deadline on January 30th. Suneung, Arirang News.
South Korea and Cambodia have formally launched a bilateral joint task force aimed at responding to online scam operations and other transnational crimes. On Monday, acting Korean Police Commissioner General Yoo Jae-sung and his Cambodian counterpart Sutet signed a memorandum of understanding in Phnom Penh. The task force will operate inside the Cambodian National Police with officers from both countries working together from incident reporting to investigation, rescue, and repatriation. The group was launched during Foreign Minister Do Hyun's trip to Cambodia. He paid a courtesy call on Prime Minister Hun Manet, who said Cambodia is making nationwide efforts to dismantle scam networks. Jewel also held talks with Foreign Minister Prak Sokhonn, agreeing to expand cooperation ahead of the 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties. A North Korea-backed hacker group has launched a new form of cyber attack that infiltrates victims' smartphones and PCs, and not only steals personal information but also remotely controls personal devices. Our Ian-jin has the details.
Kang-in Security Center, a South Korean cybersecurity institute, released a report on Monday to say that a North Korean-backed hacker group has carried out a destructive cyber attack that remotely controlled Android smartphones and PCs to not only steal personal information, but also completely wipe key documents. The distribution of malware through a messenger platform impersonating trusted acquaintances is a method that has been analyzed to be typical of North Korean cyber attacks. But according to the threat analysis report, this latest incident reveals a new, unprecedented attack technique. The malware infiltrating the victim's smartphones or PCs contained webcam and microphone control features, suggesting that the attackers could have monitored the victim's activities in real time. Using Google's location services, the hackers confirmed when the victims were away from their desks at home or office, then executed a remote wipe command on Android personal devices, deleting all stored data. The report explained that the remote reset halted normal device operations, temporarily blocking notification and message alerts, which effectively cut off the account owner's awareness channels, thereby delaying detection and response. This demonstrates tactical maturity, marking the development of what is called Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. The Cybersecurity Institute advised smart device users to actively practice personal data security measures, such as enabling two-step authentication, avoiding saving passwords automatically in browsers, and turning off PCs when not in use. Further, it emphasized the importance of device manufacturers strengthening multi-factor authentication systems. 이은진, Arirang News.
This Thursday, students in South Korea take the annual college entrance exam Suneung, a high-stakes 8-hour series of exams defined by immense personal and national pressure. To ensure every student has an equal and quiet environment to perform their best, the entire nation is once again pausing, implementing sweeping measures to control traffic and even ground flights. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
These packages are among the most heavily protected parcels in the nation. They contain the test papers for the Suneung, or the College Scholastic Ability Test, which are being distributed to 85 test districts. The papers are being transported under heavy security and will be stored at secure locations until the exam this Thursday. This year, 554,174 students are registered to take the test at 1,310 centers nationwide. The Education Ministry says it is working with teachers on site to ensure a smooth process over the final 3 days.
For the remaining 3 days, we will meticulously check to ensure there are no disruptions to the exam. The Education Ministry will do its best, together with the teachers, preparing on site.
Nationwide support measures will be in place this Thursday to ensure students can take the exam without disruption. The exam runs from 8:40 a.m. to 5:45 p.m. To prevent traffic congestion, the government has requested public offices and businesses to delay their start times until 10 a.m. During the peak student commute from 6 a.m. to 8:10 a.m., subway services in the Seoul metropolitan area will be expanded. Scenes like this, test takers getting out of a police car will not be a surprise, as police will also provide emergency escorts for students running late to ensure they arrive on time. Additionally, private vehicle access will be prohibited within 200 meters of test site entrances, requiring students to walk the remaining distance. Strict noise control measures will be enforced. The drivers of buses and trains near exam sites are asked to slow down and avoid using horns, while construction and public events are requested to minimize noise. These measures will peak during the 25-minute English listening test starting at 1:10 p.m. During this window, all aircraft takeoffs and landings nationwide will be suspended, and all military exercises, including artillery fire and tank movements, will be halted. These nationwide efforts underscore a society pausing in support of the test takers, who are also mostly teens, reflecting the same hopes and fervent prayers of parents nationwide as they try to reach their full potential. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports reached a record high in the third quarter, driven by strong semiconductor exports amid a super cycle in the chip industry, prompted by an AI boom. Moon Ji-young reports.
Exports expanded during the July to September period, marking a 6.5% increase from the same period last year to reach $185 billion. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Monday, this expansion marks the largest quarterly export figure since the ministry began compiling relevant data in 2010. The growth also marks the second consecutive quarter of year-on-year growth, following a 2.1% rise in the second quarter. In addition, the number of exporting firms grew 4.5% year-on-year to nearly 70,000. The ministry explained that although unresolved South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations could have weighed on exports through the third quarter, Strong semiconductor shipments led the overall export growth. By type of goods, exports of capital goods led by semiconductors increased by over 11%, while consumer goods led by automobiles rose nearly 5%, ending 4 consecutive quarters of decline. By company size, SME exports surged nearly 12%, led by increases in consumer and capital goods. Mid-sized firms also posted strong results, with exports growing 7%, primarily in capital goods and raw materials. And large enterprises saw an over 5% rise in exports driven by capital goods. The ministry noted that increased semiconductor exports were the main driver for large firms, while growth in semiconductor parts and equipment boosted medium-sized companies' exports. While automobile exports to the U.S. and China fell, shipments to Europe increased, driven by robust demand for electric vehicles. Total imports saw a modest rise of 1.5%, amounting to $162.4 billion. 문지영, Arirang News.
A presidential commission approved a goal on Monday to reduce South Korea's greenhouse gas emissions by 53% to 61% from 2018 levels within the next decade, following an agreement between the government and the ruling party on gas reduction targets. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin has this report.
The government and ruling Democratic Party have reached a consensus on South Korea's 2035 greenhouse gas reduction targets. A high-level policy consultation meeting on Sunday was attended by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, leader of Democratic Party Jung Chong-rae, and Presidential Chief of Staff Kang In-sik. At the meeting, the target for reducing South Korea's greenhouse gas emission under its 2035 nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement was set at the 53% to 61% range.
For a sustainable future, reducing national greenhouse gas emissions is a task that can no longer be postponed.
The government had presented 2 final candidate plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions last week by either 50 to 60% or 53 to 60%, compared to 2018 levels by 2035, replacing the current target of a 40% reduction by 2030. Through this meeting, the upper limit has been raised by 1 percentage point, a move interpreted as showing the government's stronger commitment to reducing carbon emissions. Civil society groups had called for a 65% reduction, while industry representatives proposed a 48% reduction. The government and ruling party pledged to seek additional support to ease the burden on industries through measures such as the KGX Green Transition Strategy to support Korean companies in transitioning to decarbonized industries and to foster the growth of a greener society. The final target range will be approved by the Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth and the Cabinet this week, before submission to the UN next week. Other items on the agenda included tax relief measures aimed at sustaining the recent rise in the Kospi Stock Index. The initial government proposal was to impose a top tax rate of 35% on dividend income exceeding 300 million won, or around $206,000. However, the ruling party called for lowering the top tax rate to 25% in an effort to strengthen shareholder value and reduce the tax burden for income earned from stock dividends. So the ruling bloc is considering a revised plan. Though the two sides now seem to have settled on a 25% top tax rate, the final rate will be fixed through discussions at the upcoming regular session of the National Assembly. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Korean culture isn't just about K-pop anymore. From literature to design, it's gaining global attention. Now, in that spirit, Korea's Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism hosted a festival to celebrate those who are sharing Korean culture with the world. Pyongyang was there.
Held at the CKL stage in central Seoul, the K-Creators Awards kicked off the 2025 K-Wave Festival and honored global influencers, honorary reporters, and winners of the Talk Korea contest who have promoted Korea's culture in unique ways. Streamed live on KoreaNet's official YouTube channel, the event opened with a dynamic taekwondo performance by Junior K-Tigers, followed by remarks from a Culture Ministry representative.
In 2025, fueled by the global popularity of K-pop Demon Hunters, interest in Korean lifestyle, from food and fashion to traditional houses and medicine, is spreading worldwide. This growing closeness between Korea and the world is made possible by the passion and dedication of those who share and celebrate Korean culture.
Awards were presented to 15 individuals from around the world, recognizing their efforts to share Korean stories beyond just pop music.
Of course, I am happy and feel proud of myself because this is my first time for me, and it keeps reminding for me to keep growing.
In this opportunity to create content about this topic, for me, it's really amazing for this connect with these people around the world.
And I think Korean literature is a hidden gem, so I want to introduce people to it and share my passion. And actually, I think Middle Eastern countries can learn from Korea's experience because they have some similarities.
After the ceremony, winners embarked on a 9-day cultural tour, exploring Seoul's landmarks and experiencing the depth of Korean heritage firsthand. The Culture Ministry says it hopes that events like this will help Korea share its creativity with the world, not just through K-pop, but through every facet of its culture. Hyunyeong, Arirang News.
Thank you, co-hosts, for making this possible.
It is time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Nitze, joining us in the studio. Welcome back, Paul.
Thank you. Hello.
So I do have to say some important contributions in the field of football were made by South Korean stars in Europe over the weekend. Do tell us more.
Yes, goals and assists for some members of the national team.
Right.
In France, Kang-in marked his 100th appearance for PSG with a match-winning assist for Paris Saint-Germain in a 3-2 win over Lyon on Sunday. He set up João Neves for the winning goal in the 95th minute. It was his first assist of the season from 10 league appearances overall. PSG sit top, 2 points clear of Marseille and Lyon after 12 matches played. Meanwhile, in Belgium, Oh Hyung-gyu scored for the third game running, helping Genk draw 1-1 away to Ghent. Oh scored the game's opener on 24 minutes, but also scored in the Europa League away to Braga in Portugal in a 4-3 win last Thursday, and got the winner away to Westerlo last Sunday. It bodes well for the national team, with both players involved for the upcoming friendlies with Bolivia and Ghana.
Right, now to baseball. South Korea's national team swept its 2-game exhibition series against the Czech Republic, right?
It did, which again bodes well ahead of the World Baseball Classic next year. At Gochok Sky Dome in Seoul on Sunday, Korea exploded for 17 hits in a powerful 11-1 victory in Game 2. After a slow start, the Korean hitters broke the game open in the later innings, capitalizing on Czech pitching mistakes. Some key performances included Moon Hyun-bin, who went 3 for 5 with 3 RBIs, and Kim Sung-yoon, who added 2 hits and an RBI. Lee Jae-won, meanwhile, hit a 2-run homer in the top of the 9th inning. The first match, played the day before, ended 3-0 to South Korea, a game that yielded just 5 hits. Up next is a 2-game series with Japan in Tokyo on November 15th and 16th. The World Baseball Classic is slated for March next year.
Definitely something to look forward to. Now, moving on to esports, another victory for South Korea's T1.
Yeah, making history by clinching its 3rd straight League of Legends world title on Sunday. In an all-Korean final held in Chengdu in China, the team, led by legendary captain Lee Sang-hyuk, known as Faker, defeated KT Rolster in a tight match 3-2. Sunday's win also marks T1's 6th World Championship victory overall since 2013. No team has won more world titles than T1.
Right. And finally, to under-17 football World Cup, South Korea secured a place in the knockout rounds. What can you tell us?
Right, so they are through, still with 1 game still to play in the group. They've earned 4 points so far. They got a 2-1 win over Mexico and then a 0-0 draw with Switzerland. Now, Korea will finish in at least 3rd place, which means that regardless of their result with the Ivory Coast tonight, they are through to the round of 32. Who they'll play next, of course, depends on what their final position will be in the group. Now, Ivory Coast are already out following 2 losses, and South Korea have reached the knockout stages of this World Cup for the first time since the 2019 edition.
Well, fingers crossed. Paul, thanks for coming in as always.
Thank you.
It seems like a sudden cold snap comes around every Monday. This morning in Seoul, the temperature dropped to 5.4 degrees Celsius, and the wind made it feel even colder at 3.3 degrees. Even in the middle of the day, the temperature didn't rise significantly. This winter-like cold won't last long. From tomorrow afternoon, the cold will gradually ease off a bit, and from Wednesday, we'll return to the usual temperature for this time of year. However, for the time being, the temperature difference between morning and day and between day and night will widen. Please take good care of your health. Tomorrow morning will start cold at 3 degrees in Seoul, Daejeon, and Gyeongju, and at -1 degree in Chuncheon. Highs will top out at 14 to 18 degrees all over the country. On Thursday, the day of the college entrance exam, mild temperatures will be seen under clear skies. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
Korea, a globally recognized sports powerhouse. Behind the dazzling achievements, there's always an invisible force at work. With sophisticated materials, cutting-edge equipment, and innovative technological solutions, SMEs in the K-sports industry play a vital role in bolstering Korea's status as a sports powerhouse. By integrating AI technology, they unlock athletes' potential and enhance performance, elevating the sports environment to the next level and opening new markets in the sports industry. Their innovative technology and bold challenges drive the growth of Korea's sports industry, creating a better world through sports. The innovation of these SMEs never stops. A systematic partnership support program is implemented to discover promising sports SMEs, provide technical validation and R&D support to enhance competitiveness, and strengthen the foundation for overseas expansion. At Tokyo Sportech 2025, the technological prowess of Korean companies was recognized. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and the Korea Sports Promotion Foundation supported K-sports companies with product promotion and business consultations with global buyers, demonstrating product quality and market potential, and confirming the possibility of expanding into the global market.
저희는 ICT 강국으로서 그 바이어나 사용자들한테 신기술을 접목한 생활 스포츠 기회를 실질적으로 확대할 수 있는 그 기회를 제공하는데 많은 도움이 될 수 있으리라고 확신을 합니다.
이제 스포츠도 K죠. K 스포츠는 이겁니다.
The joy for all, created by the power of K-sports. Experience the future of the new sports industry through the innovation and technology of the Korean sports industry.
Knock knock! The magical door to the world of K animation is swinging wide open. Let's go to Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Poli Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like the total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-Animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide. Lair of the Peak.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. This week, a political aftershock is being felt across the United States. In the first major local election since President Trump began his second term, Democrats delivered sweeping victories, taking control in key battlegrounds such as New York, Virginia, and New Jersey. The elections brought historic firsts, including New York's first Muslim mayor and Virginia's first female governor. Meanwhile, after some 40 days, the federal government shutdown, the longest in U.S. history, has finally begun moving toward a resolution. But the political damage and public frustration may be far from over, with both parties now recalibrating ahead of next year's high-stakes midterms. So for a closer look into the situation, we are joined in the studio by Min Jung-hoon, professor at the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is journalist Chris Casquejo. Good to see you again, Chris.
Good to be with you.
So let's start a discussion, of course, with the results of the major local elections since, President Trump began his second term. So the Democrats delivered a sweeping victory there. Chris, tell us, how are the results being interpreted locally in the United States, and how are both parties reacting to this?
Right, let's talk about three states, Virginia, New Jersey, and California. In Virginia, former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger easily won the governor's race with a message focused on affordability. And of course, the state of Virginia here in the U.S. is home to hundreds of thousands of federal workers who have lost their jobs early in the first year here of the second Trump administration. Now, in New Jersey, former Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill also won handily with strong support from Latino and suburban voters who are concerned about affordability and health care. In California, voters approved Proposition 50, which was a statewide measure to redraw congressional maps in favor of Democrats to counter similar efforts in Texas, which was seen as part of the same wave of backlash and organization against, the Republican agenda. Across the board, voters prioritize cost of living over culture war issues, which is a break from what happened in 2024. And while Trump wasn't on the ballot, his influence did loom large. Analysts say these results might reflect growing voter pushback against the broader GOP agenda. Now, Democrats see some momentum heading into next year, 2026, especially in California. Gavin Newsom's efforts to get Proposition 50 on the ballot. He raised over $100 million and employed an organized network to get this vote out in a very quick manner. But U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson dismissed the results, saying blue states and cities voted blue, which was not a surprise.
So those results definitely seem to be an early indicator of where the public stands over there. So Chris there in Washington, D.C. gave us a very good recap of the results of the latest election. Professor Min, I wonder, were the results in line with what you've expected?
Yes, it went well with my expectations. The 3 states have been the blue states where Democrats usually dominate the outcome of the elections. But even if the election results were predictable, but the Democratic Party's victory in the elections is absolutely good news for them. Since their defeat in the presidential election last year, the Democratic Party, has been struggling to mobilize supporters due to the lack of leadership. And Democratic supporters are hoping this victory will spark a revival of the party. In particular, they expect that the emergence of Zoran Mamdani, a young Muslim, the New York mayor, will bring a breath of fresh air to American politics. But however, it remains to be seen whether this victory will last until the midterm election next year. That's mainly because it's still left 1 year to go. And so we don't know what will actually happen during that period of time. In addition, it's also uncertain whether a radical progressive or left-wing politician or social democrats like the Zoran Mamdani will be able to lead the big Democratic Party to win the midterm election as an alternative. And it's unclear whether he can receive support from moderate Democrats and independents because many people think that he is a little bit far left. Or something like that. So we'll see what will actually happen in the coming months.
So as our Professor Min pointed out, Zoran Mamdani. So now that brings us to the question, who is this figure? Who really became the youngest, first Muslim mayor of New York? Chris, do tell us for our viewers, who is this figure and how are local media outlets reacting to this victory?
Well, it's been a spectacular rise to power as the mayor of the largest city in the U.S. for 34-year-old Zoran Mamdani, who was a little-known state assemblyman a little more than a year ago when he first announced his candidacy for U.S. mayor, or for mayor of New York City. He is New York City's first Muslim mayor. He's 34 years old. His platform was mainly on rent freezes, free public transit, and higher taxes on the wealthy. So very progressive viewpoints in line with Democratic Socialists, which Mamdani is, like U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Now, Mamdani built a coalition of young immigrant and working class voters, particularly in the New York City boroughs of Queens and the Bronx. Now, local media are calling his win a generational shift toward bold economic-focused progressivism, but not everyone's cheering. Moderate Democrats are wary of Mamdani and his platform, and so are some of the major businesses that have presences in New York City. Naturally, Republicans are seizing on his image, branding Mamdani as the face of a radical Democratic Party ahead of the 2026 midterms. His name is already being tested in GOP attack messaging in some of the so-called swing states that decided the election in 2024. But Democrats say his win reflects that they have a broad coalition. You saw moderates win in Virginia and New Jersey, in Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill. And now you saw Mamdani, who's a very progressive Democratic Socialist, win the mayorship in the largest city, New York.
Right, so it sounds like his win is more than just demographics. It reflects something deeper than that. But let's broaden to a bigger picture, Professor Min. So President Trump has pointed to the latest results as it's due to the ongoing federal shutdown as the reason for the loss. In your view, what are the driving forces behind the Democrats' strong show in the elections?
Yeah, first of all, I also think that the government shutdown affected the victory of the Democrat Party in their 3 elections, especially as Chris mentioned, there are many government employees living in Virginia and they had a direct impact from the shutdown. And people blamed the White House and Republicans for the shutdown more than Democrats. And therefore, the shutdown contributed to the Democratic victory in the elections. And meanwhile, it was reported that the elections were seen as a mini midterm evaluation of the Trump administration. So many people believe that it was an assessment of Trump government's economic policies, particularly the high cost of living caused by tariffs. So as you remember, the high cost of living or inflation in the United States played a major role in President Trump's victory last year. And so the high inflation resulted from the huge amount of money spread out to the public to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Biden government's efforts to control the inflation failed to achieve the desired outcome and eventually resulted in Trump's victory. So the high cost of living was the main factor that brought Trump back into the White House, but it is now holding him back. So, but there's still 1 year to go before the midterm election next year. So I think there is sufficient time for voters to change their assessments of the U.S. economy. So the economic situation in the first half of next year will have a significant impact on the outcome of the midterm elections next year.
So we'll have to keep close tabs on the economic situation in the U.S. until that time. Now, as we speak of the government shutdown, which has stretched for nearly 40 days and it's now finally entering its final stages, Chris, tell us, what kind of impact has it had so far and what changes have people actually been feeling on the ground?
Well, the shutdown is now in its 6th week, and even though a deal is reportedly near, there's been a lot of damage. Roughly 750,000 federal workers have gone without pay for almost 40 days, and many have turned to standing in line at food banks, gig work, and emergency assistance just to keep their households afloat. Now, air travel has been hit particularly hard. The Federal Aviation Administration ordered airlines to reduce domestic flights by up to 10% due to staffing shortages and people calling in sick because they simply haven't been getting paid. On one day alone last week, more than 2,100 flights were canceled. So this had threatened to really impact the busy travel season coming up, the holiday travel season coming up, with Thanksgiving, the holiday in just a couple of weeks, and Christmas several weeks later, which is when air travel will be at its highest. Now, essential services in the U.S. were also disrupted. Passport processing, national parks were closed, food safety inspections had been going on, and housing assistance payments slowed or halted. And supplemental nutritional assistance programs, food assistance, came dangerously close to running out, putting a lot of pressure on lower income families. Now, the shutdown has cost the economy, according to economists, an estimated $12 to $14 billion, with lost productivity and delayed government contracts adding up fast. And on the ground, frustration is widespread. Public sector workers say that morale is at a breaking point because they haven't been getting paid this entire time. And many say that the fallout will be felt long after the government reopens.
Right, so 6 weeks, it's a very long period, and the people must have felt this effects in their daily lives as well. So what were actually the key issues at the heart of this shutdown, Chris? And also tell us what brought about this unexpected turnaround, just as many feared it could drag on even longer.
Yeah, it came down to a battle over healthcare, specifically tax credits related to the Affordable Care Act, which is known as Obamacare. Republicans wanted a clean bill, clean continuing resolution to reopen the government with no strings attached. The Democrats insisted on guarantees, those healthcare tax credit, funding for SNAP, which we talked about earlier, which provides monthly grocery money to more than 41 million low-income Americans, including children, seniors, and people with disabilities. So what changed? Public frustration started to grow, especially as flights were canceled and benefit programs were canceled, specifically SNAP. And now polls showed that Republicans were taking more of the blame for the shutdown, even though they still control Congress. And the private sector, including airlines and small business coalitions, began urging lawmakers to end the standoff. So late last night, Senate leaders struck a tentative bipartisan deal that would reopen the government for 45 days, fund back pay for those federal workers, and postpone some of the debate on policy fights like healthcare. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune has promised to hold a vote on those Affordable Care Act subsidies in the second week of December. So the bottom line is the shutdown may be ending, but issues that have caused it haven't gone away. Expect another clash next month if this 45-day measure to reopen the government actually gets the votes and passes today like it's expected.
Right, so those underlying issues are still remaining at the situation. And some people, in fact, say this latest budget deadlock is just not it's actually a bigger part of a political strategy heading into next year's midterms. Professor Min, how do you see the latest situation on the shutdown?
Yes, I also see the situation that it's like a political power struggle before the next year's midterm elections. Personally, I think that the results of the 2026 midterm elections will have a significant impact on President Trump's future governance. So if the Republican Party wins the elections and maintains its majority in both houses of Congress, it will bolster the political efforts of Trump administration in its second half of the term. So in particular, the Republican Party is expected to continue its role as a key political ally of President Trump through its legislative support for main policy agendas. Meanwhile, if the opposition Democrat Party wins and controls both houses of Congress or gains a majority in either the Senate or the House, it is expected that it will focus its energies on blocking the passage of key bills to prevent the White House and Republican Party from regaining power in 2028. So Trump government will likely face difficulties in passing key policy legislations during the remaining term in office. In addition, a victory in the midterm elections is expected to provide the Democratic Party with the momentum to politically revitalize itself and consolidate its supporters. So it will be like a great turning point for the opposition, the Democratic Party. So for both parties, the midterm elections will be a very, very important event.
Definitely. So beyond the budget, it sounds like political positioning was a big part of the story here. Now, some observers actually say that the latest defeat could mark the beginning of a, quote, lame duck period for President Trump. Chris, what's the actual mood like inside Washington?
Well, obviously, Democrats and Republicans feel differently about the election results. And the mood, I expect the mood to lighten up a bit as federal workers get back to work as a result of this temporary deal to reopen the government. Now, Trump wasn't on the ballot last Tuesday, and that mattered because turnout dropped among the so-called low-propensity voters who only seem to show up when Trump's name is at the top of the ballot. Now, inside Washington, nerves are rising because of these results, even though Republicans still control Congress. And some Republican Party leaders are questioning whether Trump helps or hurts the GOP in non-presidential cycles like these off-year elections in 2025 and the midterm elections that will decide control of Congress next year in 2026. Meanwhile, the results seem to show that Democrats are gaining energy in the suburbs with women, Hispanic voters, and younger voters showing up in force. There was wide interest on the Democratic side of the ballot, and some of these voters are the ones who swung toward Trump last fall in 2024 and allowed him to sweep the so-called 7 battleground states and have a clear electoral victory last November. Now, to shift the spotlight, Republicans want to make Zoran Mamdani, new mayor of New York City, the face of the Democratic Party, framing him as the sign of a party that's moving too far left. Now, the bottom line is Trump's hold on the GOP is intact, and the party still holds Congress. But these election results may indicate that his political magic might not be transferable. So whether he's a lame duck or not, that's up for debate. But, you know, the Republican Party is so tied to Donald Trump that rightly questions are being asked about its future after Trump, since he won't be able to run for election in the next presidential election in 2028.
Right. So something certain is that the results actually dealt a big blow to President Trump, especially with his approval rate dropping to 37%, the lowest since his second term began. So, Professor Min, do you think we'll be able to see some changes in how President Trump will approach this from now on?
Yes, I think so. Personally, I think that President Trump will try to stabilize U.S. economy throughout the next year to win the midterm elections. Since the inauguration, President Trump and the Trump government has revitalized its America First trade policy to reduce the U.S. trade deficits and revitalize U.S. manufacturing capabilities by aggressively imposing tariffs to the entire world. Specifically, Trump government imposed reciprocal tariffs to the global community and initiated its trade negotiations with the major trading partners such as China, Japan, and South Korea. And such trade negotiations last several months and came to an end in early November. And President Trump called it a huge victory for America and argued that he established a new framework for fair trade. And based on the political achievements, I think Trump government will try to favorably manage its relations with the major trading partners next year. And it will also try to enhance each cooperation with those trading and technological partners to increase high-paying jobs in the U.S. and restore its manufacturing capabilities in order to secure victories in the midterm elections. So I expect that next year will be a kind of stabilizing period of time for President Trump.
So we'll be able to see some changes moving forward. As of now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Min.
Thank you.
And of course, Chris, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you again.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.